She sent the message knowing he would never answer. That was the point. At 9:47 on a freezing December night, Harper Lane collapsed on her kitchen floor, 7 months pregnant, bleeding internally, with one final text glowing on her phone screen. Preston, please, I need you.
She's pregnant and I don't know what happened.
Something
Please
is
hurry.
wrong. Across Manhattan, her husband Preston read that message, smirked, and showed it to his mistress. Watch this, he laughed. She is so predictable. Then he slipped his phone back into his pocket and ordered another glass of champagne. What Preston did not know was that Harper was not begging. She was documenting. That ignored message was not a cry for help. It was evidence. Evidence that would expose a $2 million life insurance policy taken out in secret. Evidence of forged signatures designed to frame her for crimes she never committed. Evidence that her loving husband had been planning her death for months. And by the time Preston realized what his wife had been secretly building for 6 months, it was already too late. This is the story of a woman everyone underestimated. A woman who was told she was crazy, emotional, and paranoid. A woman who smiled through her abuse while quietly preparing the trap that would destroy her abuser. Stay until the end, because the moment Harper finally confronts Preston face to face will give you chills. Value statement, but this story is not just entertainment, it is a survival guide disguised as drama. Hidden within Harper's journey are 7 real strategies that abuse survivors use to escape dangerous situations. Strategies like building a secret documentation file, creating a go bag with emergency essentials, understanding how digital evidence contains hidden timestamps that abusers cannot erase. If you or someone you love has ever felt trapped, controlled, or gaslit by a partner, this story will show you that escape is possible, that you are not as alone as he wants you to believe, and that the same qualities he calls weaknesses, your attention to detail, your memory, your quiet observation, can become your greatest weapons. Meaning of the story, Harper's story carries a truth that every woman deserves to hear. Strength is not silence. It is speaking up even when your voice shakes. Real family is not defined by marriage certificates. It is defined by who shows up when everything falls apart. And the most dangerous thing you can do to an abuser is stop believing his version of reality and start documenting your own. The cold December wind rattled the thin windows of Harper Lane's tiny Brooklyn apartment as she pressed a trembling hand against her stomach. Pain radiated through her abdomen, sharper than anything she had felt in the 7 months of her difficult pregnancy. She stumbled toward the kitchen counter, gripping the worn laminate for balance, fighting to stay upright long enough to reach her phone. But here's the truth nobody knew. Harper was not panicking. She was calculating. 6 months ago, she would have called Preston 20 times, begging, crying, apologizing for bothering him with her problems. She would have believed him when he told her she was overreacting. She would have swallowed her fear and convinced herself that everything was fine. But Harper had learned something about men like Preston Hale. They did not respond to desperation. They fed on it. So she had stopped feeding him. She had started documenting instead. She opened her notes app first, typing the date and time with shaking fingers. December 14th, 9:47 in the evening. Then she switched to her messages and typed the words she knew he would ignore. Preston, please, I need you. Something is wrong. She hit send. Then she took a screenshot, uploaded it to a hidden cloud folder she had labeled recipes, and set her phone face down on the counter. If you are in a situation like mine, here is what I wish someone had told me years ago. Screenshot everything. Save it somewhere he cannot find. A new email account he does not know about. A cloud drive with a different login. Because one day you will need proof, and proof does not lie, even when he swears that you do. The pain intensified, stealing her breath. Harper gripped the counter harder, vision blurring at the edges. But before she let herself collapse, she had one more thing to do. She dragged herself toward the bedroom closet, each step an act of will. Behind the winter coats she never wore anymore because Preston controlled the credit cards and she could not afford dry cleaning, there was a shoebox. Her hands found it in the darkness. Inside that box was everything Preston did not know about. A burner phone purchased with cash from her lunch money savings. $2,000 in small bills collected over 18 months of skipping meals and walking instead of taking the subway. Copies of financial documents she had photographed when he left his briefcase unlocked, and a USB drive containing 6 months of evidence. She called this her go bag. Every woman in a bad marriage should have one. Not because you are planning to leave today, but because you need to know that you can. Having options is having power, and power is what keeps you alive. Harper took photos of each document with her burner phone, her fingers trembling so badly she had to retake several shots. She uploaded everything to her backup cloud account, the one connected to an email address Preston had never seen. Then she put the box back exactly where it belonged, behind the coats, invisible. Only then did she let herself collapse onto the cold kitchen tile. Only then did she reach for her regular phone to call for help. But she did not call 911. If she called emergency services, the hospital would notify her emergency contact. That contact was Preston. Because he had insisted on being listed, he would know where she was before she could prepare. Instead, she called Miranda Cole. Miranda answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with concern. "Harper? It is almost 10. What is wrong?" Harper's voice came out thin and broken. "I need you. Something is happening. The baby. I cannot call Preston." Miranda did not ask questions. She did not waste time with confusion or doubt. She simply said, "I am on my way. Do not move. Do not hang up." Harper closed her eyes, the phone pressed against her cheek. The apartment spun around her, colors bleeding into shadows. She could hear Miranda grabbing her keys. Her footsteps rapid against hardwood floors. "Stay with me, Harper." Miranda's voice was an anchor in the darkness. "Talk to me. Tell me something, anything." Harper's laugh was barely a breath. "Did you know? Preston has a second phone. I found it last month, hidden in his gym bag." What was on it? Harper's consciousness flickered like a dying bulb. Texts. To someone named K, talking about timing, perfect timing, and something about making sure I would not be a problem. Miranda's sharp intake of breath cut through the phone. "Harper, what are you saying?" But Harper could not answer. The darkness was closing in, warm and heavy, pulling her under. The last thing she heard before consciousness slipped away was Miranda's voice, fierce and determined. "I am almost there. Hold on. Do you hear me? You hold on." Across the river in Manhattan, Preston Hale stood in the gilded lobby of the Plaza Hotel, completely unaware that his wife was dying on a cold kitchen floor. He adjusted his silk tie in front of a mirror, admiring the way the chandelier light caught the subtle pattern in the fabric. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and smiled. Harper. Again. The woman beside him, a striking brunette in a designer dress, leaned closer to see the screen. Kendra Vale had been Preston's mistress for 8 months, though she preferred to think of herself as his future wife. "Is that her?" Kendra asked, her voice dripping with practiced sympathy. Preston showed her the message. "Watch this, 5 more texts in the next hour. She is so predictable." Kendra giggled, the sound too bright for the situation. "Does it not get exhausting? Having a wife like that?" Preston slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding to Harper's message. Not for much longer. He did not see Kendra's slight frown at those words. He did not notice the way her smile flickered for just a moment. He was too busy checking his other phone, the one hidden in his inside pocket, the one Kendra was not supposed to know about. A text from a contact labeled simply M. "Is it done yet?" Preston typed his reply with practiced calm. "Tonight. Stop texting this number." He deleted the exchange and returned his attention to Kendra, his charming smile firmly in place. "Now. Where were we? I believe you were telling me about your plans for our future." Kendra's expression softened, all doubt forgotten in the warmth of his attention. She did not know that Preston had told her the same sweet lies he had told his first wife. She did not know about the life insurance policy. She did not know that in Preston's carefully constructed world, women were not partners. They were chess pieces. And chess pieces were meant to be sacrificed. Miranda Cole burst through Harper's apartment door at 10:15, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The door was unlocked, just as Harper always left it, despite Miranda's constant warnings. Tonight, that carelessness might have saved her life. Harper lay crumpled on the kitchen floor, pale as the moonlight streaming through the window, her phone still clutched against her cheek. Miranda dropped to her knees beside her friend, fingers searching for a pulse. It was there. Weak, but there. "Harper, can you hear me?" Miranda pulled out her own phone, dialing 911 with one hand while checking Harper's breathing with the other. "Come on, stay with me." Harper's eyelids fluttered. "Miranda, I am here. Help is coming." Miranda gave the emergency dispatcher Harper's address, then did something else, something Harper had taught her. She pulled out her phone and started recording video. "What are you doing?" Harper whispered. "Documenting. You taught me that." The ghost of a smile crossed Harper's pale lips. "Good girl." Miranda looked around the apartment while they waited for the ambulance. She had been here dozens of times, but tonight she saw it with new eyes. The peeling paint on the walls. The single lamp, with its 40-watt bulb, because Preston said higher wattage, was wasteful. The refrigerator, she knew, contained little more than crackers and soup, because Harper's allowance barely covered groceries. This was not a home. This was a cage dressed up to look like one. "You know what?" Miranda said, trying to keep Harper conscious with conversation. "When this is over, we are getting matching tattoos. Something tasteful. Like men are trash and tiny script on our ankles." Harper's laugh was barely a breath. "Maybe something more subtle. Fine. I survived then. Very classy. Very minimalist." The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, which felt like 7 hours. Paramedics swarmed into the tiny apartment, their equipment bags and stretchers filling the cramped space. Miranda answered their questions while they worked on Harper, providing what information she could. 7 months pregnant, high risk. "Husband is not here. No, I do not know where he is. No, do not call him." She does not want him notified. The paramedic, a tired-looking man in his 40s, raised an eyebrow, but did not argue. They loaded Harper into the ambulance, and Miranda climbed in beside her without asking permission. In the harsh fluorescent light of the ambulance, Harper looked even worse. Her skin had taken on a grayish tint, and her breathing was shallow and irregular. The paramedics exchanged looks that made Miranda's stomach clench. "Blood pressure dropping," one of them said quietly. "Possible placental abruption," the other replied. "We need to move." Harper's hand found Miranda's and squeezed weakly. "He is going to find out. He is going to come." Miranda squeezed back. "Let him. I have a taser in my purse and 3 decades of unresolved anger toward mediocre men. He is not built for this fight." Lenox Hill Hospital was a blur of bright lights and rushing bodies. They wheeled Harper through the emergency entrance, Miranda jogging alongside until a nurse gently but firmly redirected her to the waiting room. Family only past this point. Miranda wanted to argue that she was more family to Harper than Preston had ever been, but she knew it would not help. So she planted herself in an uncomfortable plastic chair and pulled out her phone to make the calls Harper could not make herself. First, she texted the number Harper had given her months ago, a number for emergencies only. Harper is at Lenox Hill. It is bad. Come if you can. Then she waited, watching the clock on the wall tick about minutes that felt like years. Inside the triage room, Harper drifted in and out of consciousness. Faces appeared and disappeared above her. Voices spoke in urgent tones she could not quite follow. She felt hands on her belly, heard the rapid beeping of monitors, smelled the sharp antiseptic scent of hospital cleaner. Through it all, one thing remained clear in her mind. The message she had sent Preston, the message she knew was sitting unread on his phone, the evidence she needed. A new face appeared above her, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper voice. The name tag on her scrubs read Diane Webb, RN. Harper Lane? Diane said, checking the chart. 31 years old, 7 months pregnant. Collapsed at home, Harper nodded weakly. Diane's eyes swept over Harper's body with practiced efficiency. She noted the bruises on Harper's upper arms, some yellowed with age, others fresh and purple. She noted the way Harper flinched when she touched certain spots. She noted the fear that flickered in Harper's eyes every time the door opened. Diane had been a nurse for 30 years. She knew what she was seeing. She leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Honey, I have seen a lot of women come through these doors. I know what someone running from something looks like. Is there anyone I should not let into this room?" Harper's eyes filled with tears. "My husband." Diane nodded once, her expression hardening with understanding. "Then as far as my shift is concerned, you do not have one. Here is something most women do not know. You can tell hospital staff not to confirm you are there. It is called appearing as unlisted. If he calls, they will say they have no record of you. If he shows up, they will say visiting hours are over. Remember that? It could save your life." Diane made a note in Harper's chart, then flagged her file with a discrete code that every nurse on the floor would recognize. Code orange. Patient safety concern. Verify all visitors. The doctor came in a few minutes later, a serious man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Dr. Wyatt. He explained what was happening in Harper's body using words like preeclampsia and placental stress and high risk. Harper listened with half her attention, the other half focused on the door. Preston would come. She knew he would come, not because he cared about her, but because he needed to control the narrative. He needed to play the concerned husband. He needed to make sure she did not say anything that might expose his secrets. She was not ready to face him. Not yet, but, ready or not, the confrontation was coming. At 11:45, a man appeared in the hospital waiting room. He was not particularly tall or imposing, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced down corporate boards and hostile investors. His name was Rowan Mercer, and he had not seen Harper Lane in almost a decade. Miranda spotted him immediately, rising from her plastic chair with suspicion written across her face. "Can I help you?" Rowan stopped a respectful distance away. "I am looking for Harper Lane. I am an old friend." "Yeah? What kind of friend shows up at a hospital at midnight?" Rowan pulled out his phone, showing Miranda the screen. "The kind who got a text from her 6 hours ago that said, 'If anything happens to me, contact this person.'" Miranda studied the message. It was time-stamped earlier that evening, sent from a number she did not recognize. Harper had set up an automated message, a dead man's switch, designed to alert someone if she did not check in. Smart girl, Miranda thought. Smarter than any of us knew. She is in bad shape, Miranda said finally, and she has a husband who might show up any minute. A husband who is not exactly husband of the year material, if you catch my meaning. Rowan's expression darkened. I catch your meaning. Good. Then you will understand when I say that if you try anything, I will make your life very difficult. Understood. Miranda led him to Harper's room, where Diane was adjusting an IV drip. The nurse gave Rowan a long look, then glanced at Harper for confirmation. Harper's eyes fluttered open at the sound of their footsteps. For a moment, confusion clouded her features. Then, recognition dawned. Rowan, she breathed. You got my message. Your scheduled message. He moved to her bedside, to her room, careful not to disturb the monitors. You set that up 3 months ago, after I found the life insurance policy. Rowan went very still. What life insurance policy? Harper's voice was weak but steady. Preston took out a $2 million policy on my life. I am the only beneficiary, which means the payout goes to him if I die. I found the paperwork in his desk. After he came home late one night, smelling like perfume that was not mine, the room seemed to shrink around them. Miranda sank into the chair by the window, her face pale. Diane paused in her work, listening. Harper continued, each word costing her visible effort. That night, I sat in our bathroom for 3 hours. I could not move, could not think. I had married a man who might want me dead, and I was carrying his child. Rowan's hands curled into fists at his sides. Harper, you need to go to the police. With what? Her laugh was bitter and broken. A rich, charming husband versus a pregnant woman with emotional problems? He has spent years telling everyone I am unstable, paranoid, that the pregnancy is making me crazy. Who do you think they would believe? Here's what I learned too late. Abusers do not just hurt you. They build a story about you. They tell everyone you are unstable before you even know you need to defend yourself. By the time you try to speak up, the narrative is already set. That is why documentation matters. Because your word against his is not enough. But your word plus evidence? That changes everything. Rowan pulled a chair closer to her bed. Tell me everything. So Harper told him. About the 6 months of secret documentation. About the recordings she had made on her burner phone when Preston thought she was sleeping. About the financial statements she had photographed, showing transactions that did not add up. About the cloud drive, hidden behind an innocent name, where she stored all of it. She told him about Preston's second phone, the one she had found in his gym bag. About the texts to someone named Kay, which she now knew was Kendra. About the conversations that spoke of timing and problems being solved. And she told him about the scheduled messages she had set up, a system designed to alert trusted people if she failed to check in. A digital dead man's switch for a woman who was not sure she would survive her marriage. Rowan listened, without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, processing everything. You have been preparing for this, he said quietly, for months. I have been surviving, Harper corrected. There is a difference. Before he could respond, the door burst open. A nurse Harper did not recognize stood in the doorway, looking flustered. Mrs. Lane, your husband is in the lobby. He is demanding to see you. Harper's heart rate spiked on the monitor, the beeping accelerating to match her panic. Rowan reached for her hand, steadying her. Diane stepped forward, positioning herself between Harper and the door. Tell him visiting hours are over. Tell him we have no record of a Harper Hale. Tell him whatever you need to tell him, but that man does not set foot in this room. The nurse nodded and disappeared. But Harper knew it would not be enough. Preston had never let a closed door stop him before. He would find a way in. He always did. The only question was whether she would be ready when he arrived. Preston Hale strode through the hospital lobby at 12:30 in the morning, still wearing his tailored suit from the Plaza Hotel. His tie was loosened now, his hair artfully disheveled in a way that suggested concern rather than carelessness. He had perfected this look over years of practice. The concerned husband, the devoted partner, the victim of an unstable wife. "My wife is here," he told the receptionist, his voice carrying just the right note of worry. "Harper Hale. I need to see her immediately." The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she had been working for too many hours, typed the name into her computer. "I am sorry, sir. We do not have a patient by that name." Preston's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "Try Harper Lane. She sometimes uses her maiden name." More typing. "I am showing that patient as unlisted, sir. I cannot confirm or deny her presence. I am her husband." His voice hardened beneath the veneer of concern. "I am her emergency contact." The receptionist checked her screen again. "Actually, sir, you are not." For the first time, a crack appeared in Preston's composure. "That is impossible. I have always been her emergency contact. I can only tell you what the system shows, sir. Perhaps you could speak with patient services in the morning." Preston leaned across the desk, close enough that the receptionist leaned back instinctively. "I know she is here. I received a call. Someone from this hospital told me my wife was brought in by ambulance." This was a lie. Preston had received no call from the hospital. He had tracked Harper's phone using an app he had secretly installed months ago. But the receptionist did not know that, and the lie served its purpose. "I understand your concern," the receptionist said carefully, "but without proper authorization, I cannot provide patient information. Hospital policy." Preston straightened, reassessing his approach. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw a name that made his jaw tighten. Rowan Mercer. He stepped away from the desk and answered the call, keeping his voice low. "Preston, it has been a while." Preston's tone was ice wrapped in silk. "Mercer, I should have known you would insert yourself where you do not belong." "Where is my wife?" "She is resting." Which is what she needs. Not visitors. She is my wife. I have a right to see her." "You have a lot of things, Preston." Rowan's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "A nice suit, a fancy hotel mistress, a $2 million life insurance policy, on a woman who almost died tonight." The silence stretched between them, like a wire about to snap. "I do not know what Harper told you," Preston said carefully, "but you have to understand that she has been struggling. The pregnancy has affected her mentally. She sees threats that are not there." "Does she imagine the insurance policy too?" "That policy was her idea. For the baby, in case anything happened to her during childbirth." "Interesting," Rowan replied, "because the paperwork shows you as the sole beneficiary. Not the baby, not a trust, just you. You are making a very serious accusation." "I am asking a very serious question." Rowan's voice hardened. "Why would a man take out a $2 million policy on his wife, hide it from her, and then ignore her messages when she is dying on the floor of the apartment he forced her to live in?" Preston's mask slipped entirely. "She told you about the message?" "She did not have to. I saw her phone, delivered at 9:47, never opened, never answered, while you were drinking champagne at the plaza with Kendra Vale." "How do you know where I was?" "Because I make it my business to know things, Preston, especially when they concern people I care about." Preston's hand tightened around the phone. "You have no idea what you are getting into. Walk away now, and I will forget this conversation happened." "Or what?" "Or you will find out exactly how unpleasant I can make your life." Rowan's laugh was soft and dangerous. "I have survived hostile takeovers and federal investigations. You are not even in my top 10 threats. But here is what you should worry about, Preston. Harper has been documenting everything, and I mean everything. Recordings, screenshots, financial records. The kind of evidence that makes prosecutors very interested. The line went dead. Preston stood, frozen in the middle of the hospital lobby, his mind racing through possibilities. If Harper had truly been documenting his activities, then she knew about more than just the affair. She knew about the accounts, the transfers, the carefully constructed paper trail that was supposed to lead back to her if anything went wrong. He had been so careful, so thorough in his gaslighting, his control, his manipulation of every aspect of her life. He had made her doubt her own perceptions, question her own memories, apologize for feelings she had every right to feel. But somehow, beneath all of that, she had been watching, learning, preparing. Preston pulled out his second phone, the one he kept hidden from everyone, and typed a message to the contact labeled M. "We have a problem. She knows more than we thought." The reply came within seconds. "Handle it." Before she talks to anyone else, Preston deleted the exchange and walked out of the hospital into the cold December night. He needed to think. He needed to plan. And most importantly, he needed to find out exactly how much Harper knew. By 2 in the morning, Harper's hospital room had transformed into something resembling a war room. Diane had conveniently forgotten to enforce visiting hours. Miranda had brought coffee from the vending machine, and Rowan had pulled up Harper's cloud drive on a secure tablet, reviewing 6 months of damning evidence. "This is incredible," he said, scrolling through file after file. "You documented everything." Harper's voice was tired but proud. Every time he told me I was imagining things, I wrote it down. Every time he said something that contradicted what he had told me before, I recorded it. Every time I found financial records that did not make sense, I photographed them. Rowan stopped at one file. "This recording, from 3 weeks ago. What is this?" Harper closed her eyes, remembering. I pretended to be asleep. He was on his second phone, talking to someone. His mother, I think. They were discussing timing. "Perfect timing," he said, and something about making sure I would not be a problem. "Did he say anything specific?" "He said dead wives do not testify." Then he laughed. The room went silent. Miranda set down her coffee cup. "That is premeditation. That is him planning something. It is his word against mine," Harper said, "unless we can find more." "That second phone has everything. Texts, emails, call logs, but he keeps it hidden. I only found it once. And I could not access it." Rowan leaned forward. "Where does he keep it when he is not using it?" "Different places. Sometimes his gym bag, sometimes his car. But when things get serious, when he needs to be extra careful, he takes it to his mother's house in Connecticut. She has a safe in her study." Before they could discuss it further, Dr. Wyatt entered the room, his expression grave. "Harper, we need to talk about your condition." Everyone fell silent as the doctor explained. Harper's preeclampsia had worsened. The baby was showing signs of distress. They could delay surgery for maybe 24 hours, but no longer. After that, they risked losing both mother and child. "Can I have the 24 hours?" Harper asked. Dr. Wyatt hesitated. "Medically, I would advise against waiting at all. And legally?" The doctor paused, understanding more than his profession required him to acknowledge. "I can give you 24 hours. But Harper, if your blood pressure spikes or the baby shows serious distress, we move immediately. Your life comes first." After he left, Harper turned to the others. "I have 24 hours to make sure my daughter is safe. Not just medically, legally, financially, in every way that matters." Miranda pulled out a notepad. "What do we need to do?" Harper had thought about this for months. She had run through scenarios in her head while Preston slept beside her. while she pretended everything was fine, while she slowly and carefully built her escape route. First, she said, I need to change my medical proxy. It is currently set to Preston. I need it to be someone else. Me, Miranda said immediately. Second, I need to contact a family lawyer, someone who can start emergency custody paperwork in case something happens to me. I know someone, Rowan said. Elena Marsh, best in the city, owes me a favor. Third, I need to make sure my evidence is backed up somewhere else, somewhere Preston cannot find it, even if he finds the cloud drive. Already done, Miranda said. I forwarded everything to a new email account 15 minutes ago, one he does not know exists. Harper felt tears prick her eyes. You both are amazing. We are just getting started, Miranda replied. The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Rowan contacted Elena Marsh, who agreed to meet them at the hospital first thing in the morning. Miranda helped Harper fill out the medical proxy paperwork. Diane made sure all the forms were processed correctly and flagged with the appropriate urgency. By 5 in the morning, Harper had accomplished what had seemed impossible. A new medical proxy, naming Miranda as her decision-maker. A lawyer who understood her situation and was already preparing emergency paperwork. Evidence backed up in 3 separate locations, and a protective order request filed against Preston, citing the life insurance policy and documented pattern of emotional abuse. Miranda hugged her carefully, mindful of the IV lines. You did it. You actually did it. Harper allowed herself, for the first time in months, to feel something like hope. I thought I would never get here, she whispered. I thought he had me trapped forever. You were never trapped, Miranda said. You were gathering strength. There is a difference. For a few precious hours, Harper believed that the worst was over. She had evidence, allies, and a plan. Preston would be exposed. She would have her baby safely. They would start over, somewhere new, somewhere clean, somewhere free. She even let herself imagine what that life might look like. Then Rowan burst into the room at 6 in the morning, his face pale and his phone clutched in his hand. Harper, we have a problem. He showed her the screen, a news alert from a major financial publication. Breaking, Manhattan investment advisor, accused of embezzlement, wife named as co-conspirator. Harper's blood turned to ice as she read the article. Her name was everywhere. Her signature was on documents she had never signed. Her accounts, the ones Preston had forced her to open under her name, were described as the center of a massive fraud scheme. Preston had not just deleted her evidence, he had weaponized it. He had leaked selected documents to the press, carefully edited to make it look like Harper was his willing partner in crime. The narrative was already spreading. Unstable pregnant woman and her husband embroiled in financial scandal. Authorities seeking both for questioning. Harper's protective order denied. She was now a suspect, not a victim. Her medical proxy paperwork, challenged by Preston's lawyer, who was claiming she was mentally unfit to make legal decisions. Her evidence? Now it looked like proof of her guilt, not his. I do not understand, Harper whispered. How did he do this so fast? Because he was always planning for this, Rowan said grimly. He had this ready to go the moment he felt threatened. You were never supposed to wake up, Harper. You were supposed to die, and all of this would have died with you. Harper stared at the headline, feeling something inside her crack. Not break. Breaking means you are done, and she was not done. But God, she wanted to be. She wanted to close her eyes and let it all disappear. She was so tired of fighting alone. Miranda grabbed her hand. Hey, look at me. Harper met her friend's eyes. He has not won yet, Miranda said fiercely. Not while we are still breathing. Elena Marsh arrived at 7 in the morning, a whirlwind of efficiency in a sharply tailored suit. She was in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that made people pay attention when she entered a room. She also had no patience for men like Preston Hale. "I have read the news articles," Elena said, spreading documents across Harper's bedside table. "And I have reviewed your evidence files. Preston is smart. I will give him that. But he made mistakes." Harper's voice was hollow. "What mistakes? He has turned my own documentation against me." "He has used your documentation," Elena corrected, "but he did not know about the metadata." Miranda frowned. "The what?" "Digital photos contain hidden data," Elena explained. "Date, time, sometimes location. If we can prove when you took these photos and recordings, we can show you were gathering evidence of his crimes, not participating in them." Rowan nodded. "The metadata is still embedded in the original files. He only leaked the visible documents, not the source files." For the first time since seeing the news alert, Harper felt a flicker of hope. "So we can prove I was documenting, not collaborating? If we can get the originals to the right people before Preston's narrative takes hold, yes. Here's something I learned too late. Digital evidence has hidden data. Photos have timestamps. Emails have headers. Recordings have file properties. Your abuser might delete what he can see, but he probably does not know about what he cannot. Work with someone who understands this. It could be the difference between being believed and being blamed." They were deep in strategy when a knock interrupted them. Everyone tensed, expecting Preston or the police. Instead, Kendra Vale stood in the doorway. She looked terrible. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her mascara smeared, her carefully constructed appearance crumbling. This was not the confident mistress Harper had imagined. This was a woman who had just realized she was a pawn in someone else's game. Miranda stepped forward aggressively. "You have 30 seconds before I throw you out that window." "I know what he did," Kendra said, her voice shaking. Silence. Kendra continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "I did not know. I swear I did not know. He told me you were crazy, that you had trapped him with the pregnancy, that you were making his life miserable, and he was just trying to survive until he could get free." "And now?" Harper asked quietly. Kendra sank into a chair, all her glamour stripped away. "He called me at 4 this morning, told me the plan was accelerated, told me to pack my things and be ready to leave the country by tonight. Dubai," he said. "Somewhere without extradition." Miranda crossed her arms. "And you came here. Why?" "Because when I asked about you," Kendra said, her eyes meeting Harper's, "when I asked about you and the baby, he said you would not be a problem much longer. He said neither would the evidence." Diane, who had been listening from the doorway, snorted. "Well, that is not even subtle. Men really are just stupid, are they not?" Kendra let out a broken laugh. "I am starting to see that." "Welcome to clarity, sweetheart," Diane said. "It is cold here, but the coffee is good." Over the next hour, Kendra revealed everything she knew. Preston had a second phone that he kept hidden even from her. His mother, Janet, was funding his entire operation and had been the one to suggest the life insurance policy. Her exact words, according to Preston's boasting, were "dead wives do not testify." Preston's investors were not really investors. They were money launderers using him to clean dirty funds through legitimate-looking accounts, accounts that all happened to be in Harper's name. And there was a backup plan. If anything went wrong, if anyone started asking questions, Harper was supposed to take the fall. The documents were already prepared. Her forged signatures were already in place. She was never meant to survive long enough to contradict the story. "You are willing to testify to all of this?" Elena asked. "If it keeps me out of prison?" Kendra replied. "Absolutely. We need more than testimony," Elena said. "We need that second phone. That is where the real evidence is, Kendra nodded. I know where he keeps it, at his mother's house in Connecticut. He is going there today to regroup. Harper pushed herself upright in bed, fighting through exhaustion and pain. Then we need someone there, someone who can get that phone. Who? Miranda asked. Harper thought of the documents she had found months ago, buried in Preston's old files, a divorce settlement, a non-disclosure agreement, a payout to keep someone quiet. His first wife, Harper said. Cecilia. The phone call was one of the hardest things Harper had ever done. She dialed the number she had found in Preston's old records, the number belonging to a woman who had escaped Preston years before Harper even met him, a woman who had signed an NDA and taken hush money and disappeared into silence. The phone rang 5 times before someone answered. Who is this? The voice was guarded, suspicious. My name is Harper Lane. I am Preston Hale's current wife. I need your help. Silence stretched across the line. Then, quietly, I have been wondering when you would call. Cecilia Hale, now Cecilia Montgomery, had rebuilt her life in Connecticut after her divorce from Preston. She had a new name, a new career, a new existence, carefully constructed to put as much distance as possible between herself and the man who had nearly destroyed her, but she had never stopped watching, never stopped waiting for the moment when Preston's next victim would need her. I cannot talk long, Cecilia said. If Janet finds out I broke the NDA, she will bury me in litigation. I know, Harper replied, but I need to tell you what is happening. She explained everything. The life insurance policy, the financial fraud, the forged signatures, the plan to make Harper take the fall, the evidence trapped in Preston's second phone. When she finished, Cecilia was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was different, harder, more determined. He did the same thing to me, Cecilia said. The control, the gaslighting, the isolation, making everyone believe I was unstable so that when I finally tried to leave, no one would believe me. Harper's heart ached with recognition. What happened? I got pregnant, Cecilia continued, her voice cracking. He was furious, said it was not the right time, said I had done it on purpose to trap him. And then one night, we were arguing at the top of the stairs, and he pushed me. Harper's hand went instinctively to her belly. His mother covered it up, Cecilia said, paid off the hospital, made me sign papers saying I fell. And when I finally escaped, she made me sign an NDA with a 7-figure settlement. I took the money because I was broken and I just wanted to disappear. Abusers have patterns. They repeat their playbook because it works. If you are dealing with someone like Preston, find the women who came before you. Not to compare pain, but to understand his tactics. Because the best way to fight a pattern is to know it exists. Why are you telling me this now? Harper asked. Because I kept quiet for years, Cecilia replied. I let him move on to you without warning. I have lived with that guilt every day. And now I have a chance to make it right. She knew Janet's house intimately. The layout, the security codes, the location of the safe in the study where Preston kept his most sensitive materials. I can get in, Cecilia said. Janet always liked me better than any of Preston's other women. If I show up claiming to want reconciliation, she will let me in. It is dangerous. Everything about loving Preston was dangerous. At least this time, I am choosing the risk for myself. They made a plan. Cecilia would visit Janet under the guise of wanting to reconnect. While there, she would find the second phone and clone its data. Rowan provided her with a device that could copy everything in minutes. It was risky. It was possibly illegal. It was their best shot. But timing was not on their side. Just as Cecilia prepared to leave for Janet's estate, Harper's monitors began screaming. The baby's heart rate was dropping. Dr. Wyatt rushed into the room, his face grim. "Harper, we are out of time. The C-section has to happen now." Harper grabbed Miranda's hand. "The plan." "Cecilia, I will coordinate," Miranda said fiercely. "You focus on surviving. Both of you." Harper was wheeled toward the operating room, fear and determination warring in her chest. She managed one last instruction. "Whatever you find, make sure it goes to Elena first. Not the police. Elena first." The OR doors swung closed behind her, and everything that happened next would happen without her. The operating room was cold and bright, filled with the hum of machines and the controlled urgency of medical professionals. Harper lay on the table, conscious but sedated, aware of movement and pressure behind the blue surgical curtain, but unable to see or control any of it. She was, for the first time in months, completely powerless. Dr. Wyatt's voice came from somewhere beyond the curtain. "Okay, Harper, you are doing great. Just stay still and breathe. We are almost there." Harper tried to focus on breathing, but her mind kept spinning back to everything happening outside this room. Cecilia driving to Janet's estate, Preston plotting his escape, evidence that might save her or damn her, depending on who found it first. Then the monitors changed. A sharp beeping, faster and more urgent than before. "Heart rate dropping," someone said. Dr. Wyatt's voice turned tight. "The cord is compressed. We need to move faster." Harper's own heart raced as she listened to the controlled chaos around her. She could not see her daughter, could not help her, could only lie there and pray to whatever force might be listening that her baby would survive. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, sweetheart, fight. Please fight." The next 60 seconds were the longest of her life. Then a sound cut through the tension, a cry, weak and thin, but undeniably alive. "She is here?" Dr. Wyatt said, and Harper could hear the relief in his voice, small but strong. "We need to get her to the NICU immediately." Harper never saw her daughter's face. The baby was wrapped and rushed away before Harper could do more than catch a glimpse of a tiny pink hand. But she was alive. That was what mattered. Her daughter was alive. The first catastrophe had been survived. But 2 more were already unfolding. 40 miles away in Connecticut, Cecilia Montgomery walked through the front door of Janet Hale's estate. She had dressed carefully for the visit, elegant but understated, the perfect image of a reformed ex-wife seeking closure. Janet greeted her with suspicious hospitality. "Cecilia, dear, what a surprise." "I know I should have called," Cecilia said smoothly, "but I have been doing a lot of thinking lately. About the past, about forgiveness. I thought perhaps we could talk." Janet studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Come in. I will have Margaret bring tea." The house was exactly as Cecilia remembered. Expensive furnishings, fresh flowers, the subtle scent of old money and older secrets. She made small talk with Janet, sipping tea and nodding at appropriate moments, all while waiting for her chance. It came when Janet excused herself to take a phone call. Cecilia moved quickly. She had maybe 3 minutes before Janet returned. She slipped into the study, found the safe behind the false panel in the bookshelf, entered the code she remembered from years ago. The safe swung open, but it was empty. Preston had moved everything. Cecilia's heart sank. She closed the safe, replaced the panel, tried to think of where else he might have hidden. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Cecilia. What a pleasant surprise. She turned slowly. Preston stood in the doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and a smile on his face. He had known. He had known all along. "Looking for something?" Preston asked. Cecilia straightened her spine. "Just old memories." Preston stepped closer. "You know, I always admired your tenacity. Even when we were married, you never quite gave up fighting me. It was almost charming. Let me leave, Preston. I do not have anything. No, Preston agreed. You do not. But you were supposed to, which means someone sent you here. His smile widened. Say hello to Harper for me. The second catastrophe had arrived. Back at the hospital, Harper was barely conscious in recovery when Detective Rosa Martinez walked into her room. The detective was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a weary expression. Mrs. Lane. I need to ask you some questions about your involvement in your husband's financial activities. Harper struggled to focus through the fog of medication. I am the victim. Martinez's expression did not change. That is not what the evidence suggests. Your name is on every account. Your signatures are on every document. They are forged. Then help me understand why your own husband is pointing the finger at you. Harper's blood ran cold. What? Martinez pulled out a tablet, showing Harper a video. Preston, looking suitably distressed, sitting in what appeared to be a police interview room. I tried to protect her, Preston said, on the video. I knew she was struggling mentally, especially with the pregnancy, but I never imagined she would do something like this. When I found out about the accounts, about the money, I was devastated. My own wife, using our marriage to commit fraud. That is a lie, Harper whispered. He is also filing for emergency custody of your daughter, Martinez continued, citing your mental instability and alleged criminal involvement. Harper felt the room spinning around her. He is trying to take my baby. Martinez hesitated. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of doubt in the official story she was required to investigate. I am not here to take your statement yet, Martinez said quietly. You just had surgery, but I need you to stay available for questioning. Do not try to leave the hospital. I just gave birth. Harper's voice cracked. I can barely sit up. Where exactly would I go? Martinez left. Harper lay alone in the recovery room, fighting the sedation that wanted to pull her under. Her daughter was in the NICU. Her evidence had failed to materialize, and Preston was not just escaping justice. He was coming to take her child. Miranda burst through the door minutes later. Cecilia has been arrested, Miranda gasped. Preston called the police, said she broke in. Janet is backing him up. And Harper, Preston is here, in the hospital, right now. With a lawyer. He is filing for custody, the third catastrophe. All three hitting within an hour of each other. Harper had never felt more defeated in her life. Harper refused to stay in bed. The nurses objected. Dr. Wyatt strongly advised against it. Her body screamed at her with every movement. She did not care. She had spent 7 months hiding, 7 months documenting, 7 months waiting for someone else to save her. She was done waiting. Diane helped her into a wheelchair, moving quietly to avoid alerting the duty nurse, who would certainly stop them. Miranda took the handles and began pushing her toward the administrative wing, where Preston was currently meeting with Child Protective Services. Are you sure about this? Miranda asked. Harper's voice was steady, despite her exhaustion. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. The administrative office was a small conference room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs. Preston sat at the table, flanked by his lawyer in full performance mode. Worried husband, concerned father, victim of a disturbed wife. And given her history of paranoid accusations, Preston was saying as Harper wheeled herself through the door, I genuinely fear for my daughter's safety. Then you should be terrified, Harper said, because I am about to take everything from you. The room went still. Preston turned, shock flickering across his features, before his mask reset. Harper, you should be resting. I should be dead, Harper replied. That was your plan, was it not? The CPS officer, a middle-aged woman with a folder full of Preston's accusations, looked between them uncertainly. Harper did not wait for permission to continue. She had spent too long asking for permission, seeking approval, waiting for someone to tell her it was okay to speak. "I have documentation of every lie you have told," Harper said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Every forged signature. And I can prove they are forged, because I have video recordings, time-stamped from my job, on the days you claim I was at the bank, signing those documents." Preston's lawyer started to object, but Harper kept going. "I have recordings of you admitting to controlling my finances, isolating me from friends, telling your mother that dead wives do not testify." Preston's face tightened. "She is delusional." "I have a witness," Harper continued, "your first wife, who will testify about the pattern, about the miscarriage that was not an accident, about the NDA your mother paid for to keep her quiet. Cecilia was arrested for trespassing, not for lying. She already gave a sworn statement to my lawyer." Preston's composure cracked. "You do not have the phone. You do not have proof." The conference room door opened. Elena Marsh walked in, followed by Rowan and Detective Martinez. "Actually," Elena said. "She does." Rowan stepped forward. "When Cecilia was caught at Janet's house, she did not have the second phone, but she had already sent an email to Elena. Everything she overheard between you and your mother. Every detail of your plan." Elena continued. "I took that email to a judge. The judge issued a warrant, and the police just found your second phone in your car, Preston. The car you drove to this hospital." Preston's face went white. Elena set a folder on the table. "Text with your mother about the life insurance policy. The timeline for Harper's accident. Instructions to frame her if she started asking questions. Communications with known money launderers. Enough evidence for federal charges." Detective Martinez stepped forward. "Preston Hale, you are under arrest for fraud, attempted insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." Preston lunged toward Harper, his mask shattering completely. "You ruined everything. Everything!" Security personnel materialized, restraining him. But Harper did not flinch. She did not cower. She looked directly into the eyes of the man who had tried to destroy her. "I used to wonder what I did wrong," Harper said quietly. "Why you chose me. Why you hurt me. But I finally understand. It was never about what I did. It was about who you are, a man who can only feel powerful by making others feel small." Preston struggled against the guards, but Harper was not finished. "I am not small anymore, Preston, and you are never going to hurt me or our daughter again." They dragged him away, his screams echoing down the hallway. The CPS officer closed her folder with a decisive snap. "Mrs. Lane, I think we are done here. Your daughter is yours." Harper finally let herself cry. 3 days later, Harper was finally cleared to visit the NICU. Miranda wheeled her through the quiet corridors of the hospital, past the nurses' station where Diane gave her a small salute, past the waiting rooms where other families sat with their own hopes and fears. The NICU was warm and dim, filled with the soft sounds of machines keeping tiny lives stable. Harper's daughter was in an incubator near the window, impossibly small and heartbreakingly perfect. The nurse showed Harper how to reach through the specially designed openings, how to touch her daughter without disturbing the delicate equipment keeping her safe. Harper's finger found her baby's palm, and those tiny fingers curled around hers with surprising strength. "Hi, sweetheart," Harper whispered. "I am your mom. I am so sorry it took me so long to get here." The baby did not respond, of course. She was too small, too new, still fighting her way into the world. But Harper felt a connection that went beyond words. This was what she had been fighting for. This tiny person who would never know the fear and pain of her mother's pregnancy, who would grow up knowing she was wanted, protected, loved. Harper made a promise right there, in the quiet of the NICU. with machines beeping softly around them. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel powerless," she whispered. "Never feel invisible. Never feel alone. I will teach you to be strong, but I will also teach you that asking for help is not weakness. I will show you what real love looks like, so you will never settle for anything less." Diane appeared beside her. "You have a name picked out?" Harper nodded. "Dawn, because she came with the sunrise, and because she is my new beginning." Diane smiled. "Dawn Lane. That is beautiful. Much better than Revenge Baby, which is what I would have gone with." Harper laughed. A real laugh, the first one in longer than she could remember. The weeks that followed were a blur of recovery and rebuilding. Preston was denied bail. The evidence from his second phone, combined with Cecilia's testimony and Kendra's cooperation, painted a picture that no expensive lawyer could spin. Federal charges were added to state charges. His assets were frozen. His mother, Janet, faced her own indictment for conspiracy. Kendra avoided prison in exchange for her testimony. She moved to California, determined to start over with a clear understanding of the kind of man she had almost tied herself to. Cecilia and Harper became unlikely friends, bonded by their shared survival. Cecilia visited the hospital twice, bringing flowers and baby clothes, and the kind of understanding that only comes from walking the same dark road. Detective Martinez personally apologized to Harper for initially treating her as a suspect. She also quietly began advocating for better training on recognizing domestic abuse in financial crime cases. Miranda got promoted at work. She credited Harper for teaching her to document everything, a skill that had apparently impressed her supervisors when applied to professional situations as well. Rowan remained a friend. Nothing more. He understood that Harper did not need a man to complete her story. She needed time to heal, to grow, to become whoever she was meant to be without Preston's shadow looming over her. 1 month after Dawn's birth, Harper stood in her new apartment. It was small, modest, a walk-up in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood where the neighbors brought casseroles and the landlady let Harper pay rent a few days late without charging fees. But it was hers. Every square foot of it belonged to her. No one controlled the thermostat, or the light bulbs, or the groceries in the refrigerator. No one told her she was too sensitive, or too emotional, or too much. She was finally, beautifully, enough. Miranda visited that evening, bringing takeout and sparkling cider because Harper was still breastfeeding. "So," Miranda said, settling onto the second-hand couch with a container of lo mein, "what happens next?" Harper looked around her apartment. At Dawn sleeping peacefully in the crib by the window. At her phone filled with contacts of the women who had helped her. At the future stretching out before her, uncertain but open. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," Harper said slowly, "that asking for help was weakness. But I was wrong." Miranda waited, listening. "Strength is not silence," Harper continued. "It is speaking up even when your voice shakes. It is building a network when your abuser tries to isolate you. It is documenting when he tells you that you are crazy. It is trusting other women when he says they are your enemy." Harper met Miranda's eyes. "I survived Preston Hale, not because I was lucky, but because I prepared, because I was not as alone as he wanted me to believe." Miranda raised her sparkling cider. To surviving. Harper raised hers. To not doing it alone. They clinked glasses as the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "And if you are listening to this, and you see yourself in my story," Harper added quietly, speaking to everyone and no one and every woman who had ever felt trapped by someone who claimed to love her, "I need you to hear me. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not stuck. You have more power than you know. Start where you are. Document what you can. Find your people. And when you are ready, you will walk out that door and never look back. Harper opened the window, letting in the cool evening air. Dawn stirred in her crib, but did not wake. For the first time in years, Harper took a truly free breath. Tomorrow, she would start job hunting. She would begin the long process of rebuilding her credit, her career, her sense of self. She would face court dates and custody hearings, and the endless paperwork of disentangling her life from Preston's wreckage. But tonight, she was home, and that was more than enough. If this story touched something in your heart today, I have a small request. Hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but as a signal to other women who need to hear this message. Your single click helps this story reach someone who might be sitting alone right now, wondering if escape is possible. Drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your reactions, or even just a single word to let us know you made it to the end. Every comment builds a community where survivors know they are not invisible. And if you have not subscribed yet, join our family. We create stories like this every week. Stories of survival, justice, and women who refuse to stay silent. Share this video with someone who needs it. You never know whose life might change because you pressed that button. Closing statement. One final note before we begin. This content was carefully researched, thoughtfully constructed, and manually edited by our team. Every word was chosen with intention. Every scene was crafted to bring meaning, emotional depth, and real-life lessons to our audience. We do not use AI-generated scripts, copied and pasted without care. We build stories that matter, for people who deserve more than empty entertainment. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Now let us begin.